I tell you, Zelensky's one of the greatest salesmen in history. Every time he comes to the country, he walks away with $50 or $60 billion. I've never been able to do that. He's a better salesman. He's a much better salesman.
This is my video update on this Sunday, midday, March the 17th. Let's talk about some news, and let's start things off once again with French President Emmanuel Macron, who continues to dominate the news cycle. Little Napoleon Macron continues to make news, but I do believe that his story arc, at least with regards to troops in Ukraine, I believe that this story arc is starting to come towards its end. But Macron is still on this hero's journey. He is still on this hero's journey, and he's still making some very interesting comments. Most of his comments are part of his overall strategy plan when it comes to Russia and the conflict in Ukraine, which is strategic ambiguity. Macron is very focused on his strategy of strategic ambiguity. And yesterday he gave two interviews, one to Ukrainian media, and then another one to French media. And in both of these interviews, we can see Macron's strategy of strategic ambiguity really come through. And so let's start with his interview with the Ukraine media. Let's start with that one. And so the journalist from Ukraine asked Macron if he would answer a phone call from Russian President Vladimir Putin. And here is what Macron said, and I quote, "I will answer if Putin calls me. That is my responsibility, and I will listen to what he suggests. France's role is to be the nerve center of the war. On the one hand, we must provide Ukraine with everything it needs to strengthen its defense capability, military equipment, but at the same time contribute to de-escalation. We need to achieve a lasting, stable, and just peace. And if Putin wants to offer something, I will listen to his proposal. But it must be said that the only negotiations are those conducted by the heads of the two countries." So if Putin rings up Macron and wants to offer something, Macron will pick up the phone and he will listen. "Okay, Putin, I'm listening. What's your offer? Come on, man. What's your offer, Putin? I'm listening." Macron lives in fantasy land, doesn't he? He really lives in fantasy land. But look, in this statement, he says that Paris is the nerve center of the war. I'm not quite sure if that is a correct translation from French to English, but anyway, I guess what Macron is saying is that Paris is a central part of this conflict, which is an interesting statement. And he says that France's role is to, on the one hand, it's to continue to arm Ukraine, to give Ukraine weapons and money, and to help them to fight Russia. But on the other hand, Paris, because it's a central part of this conflict, because it plays a central role, Macron is saying that he also has to speak with Putin and work towards some sort of de-escalation. So he's saying that Paris is central, that France, Macron, they're very central to this conflict. They play a very central role. And in his mind, in Macron's fantasy land mind, he actually believes that there will come a day when Putin gives him a call and capitulates, surrenders, offers some sort of a negotiation, a settlement, and it will be Macron who will decide if this settlement, if this capitulation, if this surrender is sufficient. Oh, Macron, my man, you crack me up. You really, really crack me up. That's what Macron is saying in this statement. That is what he is saying. There will come a day and there will come a time when Putin rings me up and he makes me an offer. And I will decide. I will decide as the president of France, as Jupiter, as little Napoleon, I will decide if this is a good offer, if this is a good capitulation and surrender. Of course, I will listen to Putin. But Macron does say that that negotiations must be conducted by the heads of the two countries. He does say that. Oh boy. So that is Macron's answer to the question if he would speak with Putin. And just 3 days ago, Macron was basically saying that there could be no settlement in Ukraine as long as Putin was president. Just 3 days ago, he was calling for some sort of a regime change in Russia, and that would be the only way to get to some sort of a peace. Now he is saying that he would pick up the phone from Putin, and he would listen to Putin's offer. So he's getting there. Macron is getting there slowly. He's getting to the real world, to reality. Slowly, he's making his way towards reality. He's not quite there yet, but he's getting closer. He is getting closer. Got to remember that Macron was also a drama student. Was he? He was a student of the theater. Isn't that where his wife met him? His wife was his teacher, and he was studying theater and acting. Reminds me of Trudeau, though Trudeau was a drama teacher. Trudeau was a drama teacher. Macron was a drama student. Annalena Baerbock is a trapeze or trampoline artist or something like that, a circus artist or something like that. And Robert Habeck wrote children's books. The Collective West EU leadership, everybody. Ah, boy, where do they find these guys? Where do they find these guys that rule over Europe? So Macron was also asked about a ceasefire during the Olympic Games, which are taking place in Paris from July 26th to April 11th. And he was asked by the Ukrainian journalist if he would contact Russia and request a ceasefire during the Olympic Games, which is part of the Olympic tradition. And Macron said it will be requested. That is what he said. He will contact Russia and request a ceasefire for the Olympic Games. That is a direct quote. It will be requested. The French leader responded. Then Macron said, the rule of the host country is to move in step with the Olympic movement. Macron said when asked about his views on the situation in which Russian athletes are allowed to participate under a neutral flag, this is a message of peace. We will also follow the decision of the Olympic Committee, he added. So why, if you're Russia and you're not allowed, or your athletes are not allowed to take part in the Olympics, this is the University of Cyprus, by the way. the new campus for the University of Cyprus. It's nice. But if you're Russia and your athletes are not allowed to take part in the Olympic Games under your flag, they can take part in the Olympics as individual athletes, but they have to participate under a neutral flag. Why would you accept any type of call for a ceasefire? Why would you even care? What does it even have to do with you as the Russian Federation? You know what I mean? If Macron, if his representatives call Russia's representatives, Russia's Olympic Committee reps, and they say, look, what do you guys think about a ceasefire from July 26th to August 11th? In Olympic tradition, in the Olympic spirit, what do you guys think of a ceasefire as Russia? And why isn't he? And why does he not mention calling Ukraine? How come in this statement he doesn't say we're going to call Russia and we're going to call Ukraine and ask for a ceasefire? Anyway, yeah, he only mentions Russia, but if they call the Russian representatives of the Olympic Games, if France calls them up and says, "What do you guys think of a ceasefire?" If you're Russia, you say, what does this have to do with us? We've been banned from the Olympics, so what do we care? I mean, you see what I mean? So this whole ceasefire talk is meaningless because Russia is not allowed to take part in the Olympic Games, so why even talk about a ceasefire? On the Russian side of things, Ukraine is taking part in the Olympics under the Ukrainian flag. So they could be contacted and they can agree as Ukraine to a ceasefire during the Olympic Games. But Russia's not part of the Olympics, or at least not part of the Paris Olympics. So a ceasefire for them is it's meaningless, absolutely meaningless. Macron also spoke to the French publication Le Parisien, and Macron told the French media that if Russia continues to win and things continue to go badly for Project Ukraine, then there is possibly, perhaps, maybe a possibility that France will, not now, but sometime in the future, if things continue to go badly for Project Ukraine, and if Russia continues to win, then maybe, perhaps, possibly, sometime in the future, French troops will have to go into Ukraine. That is what Macron told Le Parisien. Ground forces, he said, will have to go into Ukraine. And the reason France has to do this, according to Macron, is because, and I quote, "The strength of France is that we can do this." Because France has the strength, it's one of the few countries, according to Macron, that has the strength to send ground forces into Ukraine. If things go badly, then Macron said that maybe, perhaps, possibly, French soldiers will move into Ukraine. Possibly, perhaps, maybe. Not now, but maybe. Maybe, possibly, perhaps. So that's Macron, everybody. That is Macron from yesterday. More of his strategic ambiguity. Strategic ambiguity. A masterclass in military strategy and diplomacy from the French president, huh? I imagine that, let's go this way, that Macron's strategic ambiguity is really causing all kinds of problems and confusion for the Putin administration. I imagine that this is really causing all kinds of trouble for Russia and for the Russian military and for Putin himself. Macron's strategic ambiguity plan is working perfectly. It is working perfectly. Oh boy, so the Washington Post, they put out an article yesterday with the title, "In this Ukrainian village, almost no men are left." That is the article that the Washington Post put out yesterday, and it talks about how in villages in Ukraine, the men have disappeared. Either they have been sent to the front lines, according to the Washington Post, either the men have been rounded up and sent to the front lines and they've been killed, or they've been sent to the front and they're missing, or they managed to escape and they made their way to Romania or Poland or wherever they could go, and they're not coming back. And so there's no more men left in the villages in Ukraine. It's just a fact. Most of them are gone, said Larisa Bodina, deputy director of the local school, which keeps a database of students whose parents are deployed. According to the Washington Post, people are being caught like dogs on the street, noted another resident whose husband was forcefully drafted last year despite a medical condition that was meant to exempt him from the military service. The whole village was taken this way, her mother-in-law added. It's a really sad article. It's a very depressing, very sad article. And it definitely runs counter to Zelensky's claim from last month, where he said that 31,000 Ukrainians have died in this conflict. It definitely runs counter to Zelensky's 31,000 claim. But the big takeaway that I got from this article was that it highlights the resentment that is now building up in these villages towards the Zelensky regime, but also towards the cities in Ukraine, Kiev and Lvov and the big cities where the villages, they feel as if the Ukraine military is picking up men from the villages more than they're picking up men from the cities. And there's a resentment that is growing. And it makes sense from a strategic point of view. If you are the Ukraine military and you're the Zelensky regime, you are going to go to the villages first. You don't want to disrupt the day-to-day life of people living in the cities, because especially in Kiev, because this is close to where you are, and you don't want protests and stuff like that breaking out. People in Kiev calling for regime change or anything like that. So you're going to go to the villages first. You're going to go to the villages. You're going to round up men in the villages, and as the villages get empty, eventually you're going to have to start going to the cities. But there is a resentment that is building up in the villages towards the Ukraine military and towards the Zelensky regime. So it was an interesting article from the Washington Post. Has a lot of people talking. And as I said, it runs very much counter to Zelensky's statements from a month ago, where he claimed 31,000 Ukrainians have been killed in this conflict. And the Washington Post is now coming out and saying that the villages are empty. There are no more men in the villages. And it also speaks to the demographic collapse of the Ukrainian state, which is a huge issue, and it will be a huge issue going forward. Even when the war wraps up, the demographic situation, this collapse, is going to be a massive issue for Ukraine, or for whatever is left of Ukraine, whatever condition it's left in. But we also got word yesterday that the Ukrainian Air Force spokesman, Yuri Ignat, has been fired. That was a shock. Yuri Ignat was actually pretty good. I mean, he was, every now and then he would come out and say the truth as to what's going on. And I guess that's why he got fired, is because every now and then he would come out and say the truth as to what's going on in the conflict. But yeah, he's been sacked. He's been canned. Sirski and Zelensky, they continue to purge the Ukraine military of any of Zelensky supporters or anybody that is not going along with their propaganda narrative. This is not a good sign. This is not a good sign, the firing of Yuri Ignat, because he was talking a lot. Look at all the food that everyone left. The cats. Eat up, eat up. Don't let me bother you, Mr. Cats, Cyprus Cats. Yeah, he was out in front talking a lot about the conflict. And yeah, I guess he didn't want to go along with or maybe he didn't do a good job of pushing out the Su-34s are being shot down every single day fiction. Maybe they fired him because he really didn't really execute that fairy tale too well. So I guess they got rid of him for that. But anyway, not a good sign if you are the Ukraine military. So let's now shift gears and talk about Hungary. Let's talk about Hungary. And the US ambassador to Hungary, to Budapest, he was speaking at the 25th anniversary of Hungary entering NATO. And what a speech that US Ambassador Pressman gave. If you even want to call this a speech, this is the US ambassador to Hungary, and he gave a speech at the 25th anniversary of Hungary and NATO. And boy, did he lash out at the Orban government. Wow, what a speech from US Ambassador Pressman. Let's see here. What did Pressman say? Quote, "We should be mutually concerned for the well-being of democratic values, institutions, and of our relationship, regardless of who has the privilege of temporarily leading either of our governments," Pressman said. Prime Minister Orban, who, on the one hand, baselessly claims the US government is trying to overthrow his government, publicly calls for the political defeat of the President of the United States and actively participates in US partisan political events, Pressman stated. Pressman also appeared to issue a thinly veiled threat aimed at the Orban government, stating that while it may want to wait out the United States government, the United States will certainly not wait out the Orban administration. While Hungary waits, we will act, Pressman warned. What a speech from the US ambassador to Hungary. What a speech, man. He's basically calling for regime change. That's what he's calling for. He's basically telling the Orban government, the Orban administration, that we're going to regime change you. That's what he's saying. We're going to regime change you, Orban. And you know why they're going to regime change Orban? He says it in this speech because Orban went to the United States and he met with Trump. And they're upset at that. They are upset at the fact that Orban went to Florida, met with Trump, did not meet with Biden, and now they're going to regime change him. And they're telling Orban just straight out, we're going to regime change you. And the excuse they're going to use to regime change Orban is they're basically saying that Orban is taking sides in the US election. That is what they are saying. They're saying that Orban publicly calls for the political defeat of the President of the United States and actively participates in US partisan political events. While Hungary waits, we will act. They're saying that Orban is waiting for Trump to be reelected. And Pressman is saying, as you wait for Trump to be reelected, we're going to regime change you, or we're going to try to regime change you. What a statement from the ambassador. Man, kick that ambassador out. Wow, Hungary. Wow. Wow. Oh, boy. Quite a statement from Pressman. So the Orban administration, they replied to U.S. Ambassador Pressman. The speech was poorly received in Budapest, with Foreign Ministry State Secretary Manazer taking to Facebook to criticize the American envoy, suggesting his hostile remarks were not appropriate for his role at all, as international relations should actively be based on mutual respect. Quote, Hungary has always had great respect for the United States, and it always will. However, today's speech was not a speech worthy of an ambassador, but rather a speech by a leftist political activist, Menezer wrote. Things are going to heat up in Hungary. Things are going to heat up. Orban's trip to Florida and meeting with Trump, that really triggered them. That really set them off. The Biden White House is pissed off at the fact that Orban sat down with Trump. Yeah, they are very, very pissed off at that. So Niger, they ended the military agreement with the United States. So the U.S., according to various reports, is being asked to leave Niger, and the U.S. has a drone base in Niger. I believe something like 645 U.S. military personnel are in Niger. There used to be like 1,100, 1,200. But when Niger kicked out France, the U.S. started to scale back its presence in Niger as well. And now you have something like 640 military personnel, and they operate a drone base, which the U.S. military says is critical to fight terrorism in the region. But the government of Niger, they are ending this military agreement with the United States. According to CNN, Niger called this military agreement profoundly unfair. Let's walk out this way. Profoundly unfair. So the story is that the Biden White House sent a couple of diplomats to Niger to talk about renewing this military agreement. And the government in Niger, they said that the United States acted very, very unprofessionally, not in a very proper diplomatic way. They said that the United States did not announce that they were coming to Niger, did not give like concrete dates. They didn't tell the authorities in Niger how many people would be coming to Niger and taking part in this meeting. And the entire protocol was just messed up from the side of the United States. And when the U.S. representatives finally did get to Niger, the government in Niger was like, "It's over. We don't want to have this military agreement with you guys anymore." And CNN, I think CNN hints at what really happened during these meetings. Aside from the fact that, according to Niger, the U.S. side came to Niger in a very unprofessional way. But aside from that, it looks like, if you read the CNN article of the meetings that took place, it looks like the U.S. was putting pressure on Niger to break its ties with Russia, its good relations with Russia, and Niger said no, we're not going to do that. That's the feeling that I got reading CNN's reporting on this story. During the meetings, Nigerian and American officials discussed the military transition in Niger and the military cooperation between the two countries. The government, Abdamane said, Abdamane is I believe, the government spokesman. The government of Niger regrets the desire of the American delegation to deny the Nigerian people the right to choose their partners and the types of partnerships capable of helping them truly fight against terrorists. Abdurrahmane said Niger forcefully denounces the condescending attitude of the U.S. This attitude is likely to undermine the quality of our centuries-old relations and undermine the trust between our two governments, he said. He also rejected what he said were allegations of a secret deal made between Niger, Russia, and Iran. Yeah, that's it. That is it. That's what happened here. That is why Niger is ending the military agreement with the United States. The U.S. officials, they landed in Niger. They sat down with the officials in Niger to renew the military agreement. And without a doubt, the U.S. officials, they told Niger, you have to break off relations with Russia. You have to break off relations with Iran. If you don't break off relations with these countries, and if you don't do things our way, then we're going to do this and that to you and place sanctions on you and regime change you or whatever. And Niger was like, no, no, military agreement is off. That's exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened in this instance. Anyway, let's do some clown worlds and we will wrap this video up. And let's start things off with, well, I don't know if this is a clown world. Kind of a clown world. I guess it's a clown world. The Russian elections, which are taking place. We had I think today is the last day for voting in the Russian elections, actually, but they started on Friday, and I think they end today, this Sunday. But we had the U.S. State Department spokesman, Mr. Miller. He came out in a statement yesterday, I believe, either yesterday or Friday. And this is coming from the U.S. State Department. He basically said that any international observers at the polling stations during the Russian elections, that they're going to be punished for reporting what's going on at the polling stations during the elections. That's what he said. The U.S. State Department threatened foreign observers of the Russian elections. He didn't really get into any details as to what exactly the U.S. is going to do, if anything, to international observers. These are international election observers. These could be Americans, these could be people from the U.S., from Brazil, from India, from France, from all kinds of countries, Australia, whatever. These are professionals that know how elections work, and they're able to see if elections are fair and if everything is moving along in a fair way at the polling stations. And the United States has just threatened them. They've threatened them, man, because the U.S. doesn't want to have the reports coming out from these internationally recognized observers saying, you know what, the elections in Russia, yeah, there might have been some hiccups here and there. I mean, we've seen videos of some people going to the polling stations, like Navalny supporters, going to the polling stations and like pouring like iodine or whatever into one of the ballot boxes or stuff like that. But it's a video every now and then. You see a video like that coming out on the interwebs. But for the most part, the United States doesn't want these international observers to come out and say these were free and fair and well-run elections. So yeah, they're just going to punish international observers. It's very, very, very scary, actually. It's a very scary statement from the US State Department. And then they lecture the world on democracy. They lecture the world on voting and elections and democracy. And here they are saying, we don't want the international observers to report to the world how things went down in the Russian elections. We don't want them to report as to what's going on in the Russian elections. Thank God we have social media. Thank God we still have social media, and we still have Twitter and Telegram to let us know how the elections are going in any country, whether it's Russia or any other country. But speaking of elections, the Zelensky regime, they decided to put together a skit. A skit is what they decided to put together. And in this skit, this production that the Zelensky team decided to put together, and this is where the Zelensky regime really shines, is when they put together these theatrical productions, these skits for social media. They decided to create a set which looks like it's a polling station in Russia. It's not, but they created a whole set. And it looks like it's a polling station, and there's a guy that apparently goes into one of these voting booths, and apparently he's voting. And then apparently the Russian military goes into this set, and they find the guy, and then they beat him up. I mean, they put like a beat down on him. And that's supposed to show the brutality, the violence inside of Russia at these polling stations, and how the vote in Russia is being monitored by the Russian military and the Russian police. And anybody that gets out of line at one of these polling stations gets violently beaten up by the evil Putin. and the whole thing is fake. The whole thing is fake. It's actors. It's a fake set. It's all made up. It's all made up by the Zelensky regime, and then there's obvious clues that it's made up. And people on Twitter and on Telegram, they spotted this right away, and they're like, "Come on, Zelensky, this is fake." The entire setup is one big fake. It's a fake production. So anyway, that is the clown world. I will end the video there. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on ODYSEE, Rumble, Telegram, BitChute, Rockfin, and Twitter X. And go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch, or maybe you want to pick up a reverse gear hoodie. Very nice hoodie. reversegear.shop. And give a like to this video. Subscribe to this channel. Maybe one day, maybe just one day, I will get to 200,000 subscribers on YT. All right, take care.